I don't know if there is only just one or two or three things that forces inspiration out. It's a really interesting question, and I don't really know the answer except to kind of try responding to it in this way. I don't know why Rumi was inspired at the age of 37, 38 by Shams. There is a story about the Sufi teacher Hassan al-Basri who goes to a kid who had a lit candle, and Hassan asks this kid, "Where did this light come from?" And the kid blows the candle out and looks at Hassan and says, "I will tell you where I got the light if you tell me where the light went." There are lots of people who look at Shams, but they're not moved. They kind of see him as someone who's crazy, someone who's a brute, who doesn't know how to speak well, he's mean. But for Rumi, that wasn't the case. There was something about this man that inspired him. And that inspiration just wasn't for a day or two or three. He even gave his, I think if I'm not mistaken, his stepdaughter to Shams to marry so that he could stick around some more, because he always threatened to leave, and Rumi couldn't stand to be without this man. I don't know why he was inspired in such a way that he stopped talking to his disciples, where he stopped giving sermons. He was willing to go to town and ask for wine and come back to his home at the busiest time of the day so everybody can see that he's actually carrying a jug of wine, so that Shams could know that Rumi has no ego left in him. There is no self in him, that he's like clay in the hands of Shams. When his disciples become so jealous of his relationship with this old man, Shams leaves. And Rumi falls into depression. It's like this light, it just goes away. How could this man create this light, and his departure removes the light? And then he still doesn't want to talk to the disciples, because Rumi knows that it is because of them that this man left. He sends his kids, he sends his couple of faithful disciples to look for this man. And eventually Shams agrees to come back. And the moment he comes back, it's like inspiration comes back. He's full of life. He laughs. He dances. They spend time together. And then the disciples begin to become jealous again. And Shams looks at Rumi and says, if you don't do anything about this, I will leave. And if I leave, you will not find me again. But Rumi couldn't do much. And Shams leaves. When he leaves for the second time, Rumi gets depressed, but his depression has a sibling, and that sibling is inspiration. He writes about 700 poems dedicated to Shams, but the inspiration goes away again. He falls into depression. He doesn't write. He didn't like his second son, the youngest son. In fact, he hated him, so much so that he didn't go to his wedding, and if I'm not mistaken, he didn't go to his funeral either. The inspiration of not going to your son's wedding, or the inspiration of not going to your son's funeral. When he's inspired enough to write the first book of the Masnavi, inspiration goes away. He doesn't write, he doesn't talk. He gets really depressed. And he says, I want a physical human being to walk into my life where I can smell that Shams lives in him, where God lives in him, that life lives in this person. And there's a guy, he's uneducated, he doesn't know how to pronounce words the right way, but there is something about this man that brings life back to Rumi. And the way he starts his second book of Masnavi is, I had to wait until a seed has been planted inside me, and this seed has grown and sprouted. And then this guy dies, and with his death, inspiration dies. And he waits and waits and waits for another person who has something inside him that can inspire Rumi. And that's an interesting phenomenon in the sense that all of us want to be inspired from within. You want to sit and write, and you want to sit and have thoughts. And if anything about Rumi, that one should learn from is, despite all of his genius, he came to these dry spells in his life where nothing could inspire him. Not the Quran, not the memory of Shams, not his own poetry, not his own creativity. He needed another human being to walk into his life to inspire him. You can call it grace, you can call it a blessing, you can call it a gift. I don't know what you can call it. Gurdjieff had said something interesting, that there is this force in life, and this force has only one function: to swallow you as a human being. It desires to make you its subject, to do its will. Life is ultimately there to put you to sleep, to remove inspiration, to remove creativity, to make you just a body without a soul. That's what life does. It puts you to sleep. Consider the amount of time you spend, making sure your house is running smoothly. And in the end, you want to sit and read a good book. You want to sit and write a nice, creative paragraph. But there is no energy left to you. Life has taken everything, the obligations, the responsibilities. And the only way you could really overcome the obstacles created by life is if you have a death experience, like a triple bypass, if all of a sudden you run into a teacher, if all of a sudden death inspires you to walk away from everything, something, that you kind of stand outside of life and you look at life and you ask yourself, well, what is really worth pursuing in life? And if the answer is nothing, hopefully there is a teacher of sorts. Maybe you have fallen in love with someone or something. When the semester begins, I plan to go to the office still at 4 in the morning. Get up at 4, get there by 4:20 or so. I hope to write. I also know the difficulties ahead. I'm not really inspired to write. I've been writing this piece on death for about, 6 months or so. It's a relatively nice piece. And I wake up every morning, and I work on it, but I'm not inspired. I'm dragging. It's tough work, and for any work to be valuable, you need to see yourself in it. I'm not intimate with the writing, but because there is a good 100 pages I wanted to finish, but it's not going to finish. And I think it's kind of like what Hafiz had said. You wake up every morning and you sit at your computer, and for 365 nights in a row or days in a row you sit and you just hit a brick wall. Nothing moves. But the 366th day, there's a crack and writing begins. The saying of Hafiz is, I get up and I pray. I pray every night, but my prayers are never answered. I hope that tonight when I wake to pray, that the arrow that has my prayer will hit the bullseye. It will go all the way to God's ears, and God will hear, and God will send one of his angels in a dream, and I will get a response, and that'll inspire me. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, I don't know where inspiration comes from. I don't know how it fades. I don't know when it comes back or how it can come back. All of us, the 4 of us in this room, we've been in relationships. We try to inspire romance with our companions. out of the 10 outings, 20 outings, 100 outings, one comes very, very close to being an inspired night out. But it continues to miss. Once in a while you just get lucky, and I don't know how that happens. I'm not inspired to write, but I'm certainly inspired to go downstairs and build rooms under the deck. I put some breakers out, ran some wires, I have light everywhere. The difficulty though is this: if you understand inspiration and what it does to you, you should not care if it's the inspiration directed towards writing, or digging a hole to plant something, or moving compost, or moving poop from point A to point B. Inspiration is inspiration. Conflict begins when you say, my writing is going to have more value than running wires under the brick. And the moment you do that, then that value judgment is going to just mess up the fact that you woke up so early to go downstairs and to do some yard work. Because all of a sudden your rationality, your value system has made this particular inspiration irrelevant. It devalues it completely. I say I'm going to write so that my kids, once I die, hopefully, when they remember me, they say, oh, I had a father. Let me see what he wrote about death a little bit. If I can inject the same idea downstairs, that I'm building a room downstairs, I'm building a sauna, I'm building this, and I'm building that. Maybe once in a while, the way they're inspired to read a book, or to read something that I wrote, maybe they'll sit downstairs and they say, oh, my father 20 years ago, he built this room. It's really nice. But the answer to your question, I don't know. But I can tell you this. For a decade, the idea of going to Hussein's house was inspirational. It was filled with fear and confusion and joy and dread and anxiousness and fear. You had no idea if you were going to cry in front of other people, if you were going to scream, if it was going to embarrass you. You just had no idea what would happen, but you didn't care. I didn't care, Out of, I think, the 10 years of gatherings, maybe I was uninspired in maybe 4 or 5 of them. For 10 years, it was so full of life. And at a certain point, I looked at him and I felt nothing. And when he spoke, I would walk away, because all I could see and I could hear were flaws in his thinking. And the way he would approach ideas, it was childish, it was scattered. And then I remember going to Moe's at Berkeley. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I would go there for, 5, 6 years. And I would go to the 3rd floor, the section on Gurdjieff, the section on Sufism, the section on religion. I would look at books and I would look at a paragraph. I wanted to be touched by magic. I wanted one of these goddamn books to inspire me. Just something. I drove all the way from Roseville. And before heading to school, I would just stop, And I would save money because I was poor, I had no money. And I would steal money without my parents knowing, I would open boxes, grab some cash. There was no inspiration. And then one day, I went to Jacob Needleman's office, and he said something about Gurdjieff. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know who Gurdjieff was. He looks at me and says, have you ever heard of Gurdjieff? I said, no, I have no idea who Gurdjieff is. He looks at me kind of dumbfounded. He was very surprised. You don't know who Gurdjieff is? I said, no, I don't know who he is. He says, well, if I was you, I would, after my class, go and get this book called In Search of the Miraculous. I said, okay, I'll go get the book. And I go to Moe's and I found a used copy for $7. And I remember I went to a coffee shop and it was an amazing book, an amazing book. And I looked to my right and then I looked to my left, making sure that I am invisible. And so I bring the book up, I kiss the book, and I tap the book to my forehead, and I put it in my backpack, and I very quietly walk out. I was inspired by the book. I couldn't finish it. I haven't read it cover to cover, but there was something at that moment that was profoundly magical about the book. How did it happen? I don't really know. All I can say, if there is anything out there that has inspired you, whether it's cleaning the house, you wake up in the morning and you say, today I just want to clean the house. You have been touched by something profound. Once it goes away, or once you're a little too casual with it, you will long to have it back and it's not going to come back. You know, also not all artists look for inspiration. Mostly those who work with a good amount of emotions. If you are Leonardo da Vinci, if you're that type of an artist, you will yourself to create. If you're Vincent van Gogh, there is no will inside you. Inspiration comes when it wants to, and it leaves. And once it leaves, you feel orphaned, you feel deflated, you feel abandoned and lifeless. So, you know, it's like you wake up every morning to pray because there is something about your life that is in knots, and you want a prayer to come down, you want an answer to kind of resolve the situation. The world will crush them. And you say, well, maybe piano is their temple. Maybe it's dancing. Maybe it's Kumon. Maybe it's Legos. Maybe it's something that will dissuade them from watching TV. And as a parent, you know this much better than I. You come from a different culture. It's a sacred culture. It's very profound. It has depth. And tragically for you, that's where your foundation, your concrete or your dough was made. Then you come here and you see the mess around you. And you say, okay, I want my kids to have something I had for the first 16, 17 years of my life. And you give them music. You give them Shah Rukh Khan. You give them Amitabh Bachchan. You give them food that tastes like India. You know, you create these memories for them. And you hope that one of them clicks. And hopefully in the future, that memory will be a point of inspiration. Once in a while, I open Daughter of Fire. And I just glance through the pages. I'm looking for a paragraph, a line, a sentence that will inspire me. Not inspire me to continue reading the book, you know, so that I could close the book, have these ridiculous emotions consume me, go for a walk, become introverted, be unreachable, be in touch with something that I can't describe, look at my life and see it as a complete mess as well as a blessing. And I guess if you have this longing about you that says, I want to be inspired by something, kind of a feeling of homelessness to some extent. And it's tragic if you can't find a home. And you're very lucky if there is something out that can inspire you. I mean, Kamala Harris, when Joe Biden removed himself and she came in, man, that was an inspiration. Some inspirations can last a minute, some a couple of decades. You're really lucky if you can find something that can inspire you for a long period of time. You know, it's like being on the stove, you know, and this heat just cooks you day after day after day after day. And a few years pass by and you realize everything about you has changed. You smell differently, you look different, you feel different. I mean, it's great that someone as cheap and petty as Little Wayne or Eminem One Direction can inspire you. But the way they inspire you is just so short-lived. You know, when Helen was alive, She lives about 3 hours away from here. So we decided, with Helen's permission of course, to have a gathering at the pavilion. And there were people from here who drove all the way to Grass Valley. And like 3 or 4 of them would spend the night in one of Carolyn's room, all these smelly people. And they'd be fine. And I think the backdrop was that they were inspired. Sure, I don't really have much depth, but the very fact that they were willing to drive 3 hours, have bad food, listen to someone talking about ridiculous things, and then 4 of them, occupying a single tiny room, and then getting up in the morning, having bad breakfast again, going back to the pavilion. These are things that really stay with you for a long, long time, especially things that have depth. So, short answer, I don't know. I don't know how inspiration comes about. I don't know why it ends. We put a lot of pressure on this one, for good reasons. The instrument, the big black instrument out there, she's so good at it. It inspires me. When she is not by the instrument, when they're not practicing, I feel as if it's being lost, it's being stolen by this stupidity of life. And it's such a devastating thing, because it's a gift that just goes into a black hole. And there comes a point where her life becomes so busy, like she won't have time for it. It's such a frightening thing to inspire anyone who has a life, and has a good life, a life that's going somewhere, or has direction of sorts. Because inspiration kills that life. It really does. If it's outside of that life, if you have a family life and it's a good life, and you have a job and it's a good job, and you enjoy the presence of, the people in your life, if you're inspired by Socrates, he will ruin you. Unless you can give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and to God what belongs to God. But that's like 50 years down the road. And by the time you get to that mature place where you know what to give to Caesar, what to give to God, I don't think anyone has the stamina or the capacity to stick around until you reach that stage. So if you have a family life and you enjoy it, you should find inspiration within the context of just your family life. Don't try to look for inspiration that is on the outside and contradicts and creates conflicts. The problem with inspiration is it's very tempting. It's like the Garden of Eden story. There's a part of you that says no, there's another part of you that says yes, and with some encouragement, from this rebellious side of you that dislikes life and what life does to you, if that serpentine quality to you kind of just supports you even more, there's a good chance that inspiration will push you into expulsion. And once in a while you'll look up and you realize that, they're just not reachable anymore. And down here you have nothing except a very just tiny seed of inspiration whose future is uncertain. And then the conflict begins. There are these scenes in Daughter of Fire where Bayside is just sitting, and Irina looks at him and says, "I'm sorry, I don't want to bother you, but are you praying?" And he says, "Pray to who? Pray what?" And from one stance, it's such a profound thing to say, that I am the thing around which I revolve. From a different perspective, it's God doesn't inspire you, Quran doesn't inspire you, your disciples don't inspire you, nothing in life inspires you. What if you just wake up in a lousy mood where you're no longer the center? What inspires you? It's a very, very sad life for someone like him. Right now, I am not in conflict with These two tiny little creatures here, quiet, they're respectful, they're behaving like mini adults, so everything is fine. As they become a bit more casual, a bit more playful, and as they interrupt the flow of my thought, as they begin to impose themselves more and more into this space, new emotions are going to be inside me. And these are emotions I wouldn't like, because now I have to compete with them. I want to occupy the space. And I'm going to say to myself, well, how often do we really have gatherings? Not very often. How often do we get a chance to sit and talk? Not very often. How often do I give my time and my energy to these kids? All the time. And expectations come about. You know, that after such a long time, we've invited some friends, we're sitting, we're talking. And once their noise, the volume goes up, and I begin to lose some control of the space, I will also lose control of some of my emotions. And then instead of focusing on our conversation, I will have to focus on how I can tame them. There will come a point where I have to choose either to walk away, walk into the bedroom, or raise my voice, reprimand them, and just kick them out. So, as long as your environment is suitable towards the goal you're pursuing, there is no conflict. When there are forces that are opposing where you want to go, that's when conflict begins. Now, conflict can either be created by life or it can be created by someone like Gurdjieff. You don't want life conflict. That's the stupidest way to live life. And because all of us are in life, there is no other way, at least for me to say it, but to say that most of the conflicts that we deal with, they're just childish, infantile, and just plainly stupid. And we occupy life. And we occupy life because there's a good part of us that's just stupid. That's what we need to survive. If you remove yourself from life and you put yourself in Gurdjieff's life, a school, what you have now is theory morphs into application. He pushes buttons on purpose. It's like all the things he used to do to Ouspensky. Or even there is this documentary on YouTube where he looks at this woman and says, I am leaving, come to France, but come alone. And this woman has like 4 kids. She says, did he misspoke? Is he really saying that me as a mother should just abandon my kids and just go to France? And there comes a point where she makes a decision. She goes to France, but with her 4 kids. And Gurdjieff looks at her and says, good job. I'm glad that you came in with the 4 kids. When someone who's proficient at what they do, now remember, you and I are lazy, we are complacent, we are egotistical, we are filled with assumptions. We think we know, but the truth is we only have a set of assumptions you're working with. If you're working with someone who actually knows how to push you, okay, how to push certain buttons and have you lash out and then come and give you a hug, okay, to tell you I did this on purpose so you can see A, B, C, D. It's if you've seen Meetings with Remarkable Men, it's near the end of the movie where this old man looks at this young kid and says to him, the young kid being Gurdjieff, says to him, stay at this center, at this brotherhood, as long as you possibly can until certain forces are crystallized inside you. Once they're in there, solid, like callus on your fingers, go into life. Life will have no power over you. If I go into life with stage 4 cancer, I will have fun. Maybe 10 minutes in 24 hours. I will mostly be in pain. If Gurdjieff can be a cancer, all of his ideas, if these ideas can consume you, then you will know what to do with life's conflicts. First of all, once you graduate from Gurdjieff school, you're not going to occupy a lot of spaces in life. You will pick and choose, kind of like Irina Tweedy. When she returns to London, she doesn't want a big mansion, she doesn't want a big sofa, she doesn't want a big house. What she wants is a tiny space which mostly hosts people, where she can sit and she can talk. And she's not tempted by the ridiculous things that I am tempted by on a daily basis. She is solid. And she's solid because she worked with a solid man. So if you walk into life, and all of us do initially for the longest time, you have no choice but to have a good amount of conflict inside you.